Oh my God!
Oh, hi there. My name is Prostetnik Vogon Jeffs, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the 2024 demonic possession / psychological thriller / Nick Cage comedy, horror film, Longlegs, starring Maika Monroe, is it Maika or Micah? Starring Maika Monroe, Blair Underwood, Alicia Witt, and the aforementioned Nicolas Cage. Longlegs takes heavy inspiration from The Silence of the Lambs and Seven, and a host of other movies and genres, and smushes them all together to make something. It certainly is something. I'm gonna get right to it. I hate this f***ing movie. I think. I mean, maybe it's good. It might be a good movie. It's certainly divisive. A lot of people seem to love it, and a lot of people seem to hate it. I'm pretty sure I'm with the people that hate it. I'm almost positive I hate it. I'm pretty sure. Maybe. Let's get into it.
I f***ing hate this f***ing movie.
Alright, so Longlegs is directed by Osgood Perkins, better known as the son of Norman Bates himself, Anthony Perkins. I didn't realize this until after watching the movie, and it really didn't change my opinion on anything. It's a big ol' whatever for me. Although the more I think about it, the more I get this nagging word crawling out from the back of my head. It's hard to put my finger on it. Oh god, what's the word I'm thinking about? What is it? Oh yeah, nepotism. But let's not dwell on that. We've got a movie to review. A movie that has inexplicably become one of the highest grossing independent films of the year. Actually, it's not inexplicable at all. If you've been paying attention to the sewage being spewed out of Hollywood this year, it kinda makes sense. Our expectations have dropped so low that a nonsensical and derivative production like Longlegs actually pleases audiences. Go figure. This movie is terrible, and I'm going to spoil the shit out of it. Alright, we get a quick glimpse of the titular villain at the beginning of the movie. It's 1974, and a young girl is drawn out of her house by a mysterious wood-paneled station wagon. She grabs her Polaroid camera, as one does when the third act plot demands it, and heads out to investigate. As she approaches the car, she hears someone calling out, "Cuckoo," from behind her house. It's Nick Cage. Cue title. Fast forward to the 1990s. Maika Monroe is Lee Harker, an FBI agent. She's paired up with another FBI agent on an assignment to find a white middle-aged man who's been up to some undefined naughty business. When she and her partner get to their assigned neighborhood, Lee immediately knows which house their target is in.
He's in there.
How does she know this? Because she's psychic. Duh. Well, half psychic, apparently. Whatever the hell that means. Anyway, her partner is shot. I mean, she didn't see that coming. And she apprehends the killer. The end. If only. No, instead we cut to a scene where Lee does some psychic tests or something. And then soon after, she is brought in on a case by her boss, Blair Underwood's Agent William Carter. It's a series of disturbing murders since the 70s that involve fathers killing their families and themselves. And left behind at each scene is a letter, written in a mysterious cipher and signed Longlegs. Dun dun dun. Carter and Lee head back to the office and have a short gab about her abilities.
Maybe we'll just call you highly intuitive.
And then Lee gets to work on the case. Apparently, each family had a 9-year-old daughter who was born on the 14th of any given month. And all the murders happened within 6 days of the birthday. We get a long montage of her working late into the evening, and then Carter forces her to go out drinking with him. Except she doesn't drink. So it's just Carter getting drunk while Lee explains that Longlegs is influencing the murders without actually being present at the scene. Weird. Lee then drives her drunk boss home, where he forces her to come inside and meet his family. Carter's daughter, Ruby, shows Lee her room and they sit awkwardly for a bit. And because it will be relevant in the third act, Ruby asks if Lee can come to her birthday party. Lee then heads back to her house, a log cabin in the woods straight out of Twin Peaks. She calls her mom well past midnight and then wonders why it takes her so long to answer the phone.
What are you doing in the house? Do you have to let the phone ring so long?
Oh, God. Her call is interrupted when she hears some rustling outside. She gets up to lock the door and then notices someone outside in the distance. Lee grabs her gun and heads outside. It sounds like she's hyperventilating. Breathe, woman. Unable to find anyone outside, Lee turns back to her house and notices someone inside. So back in she goes, breathing like a lunatic, where she finds a letter has been left for her. Lee opens the card, which is, surprise, from Longlegs, and discovers a cipher code that, when applied to the mysterious writing in the card, warns her that revealing how she learned of the cipher code will result in her mother's death. It rhymes, too. I mean, that's cute. Lee is then called to the scene of another Longlegs murder scene. Another card has already been found, and Lee immediately deciphers it. It's a taunt from Longlegs. The victims are in the bedroom. They've been dead for about a month. There is, however, an angry cat in a carrier, and it seems perfectly healthy. I mean, a little pissed, but perfectly healthy. It's time for another montage. Lee figures out that all of the murder dates are part of some sadistic algorithm, and they form an inverted triangle. Because of course they do. But there's one date missing. I wonder if that will be important. I wonder if that will have anything to do with Lee's upcoming birthday. Or maybe Ruby Carter's birthday. Ooh, the suspense is killing me. Alright, back to it. Lee and Carter follow a clue about a lone survivor of Longlegs' shenanigans. A girl named Carrie Ann Camera, who is holed up in a mental hospital. The two agents head out to the Camera family farm and discover a life-size doll beneath the floorboards of the barn's hayloft. It was made in the image of a young Carrie Ann by a highly skilled craftsman and contains a metal orb within its head. It emits a sound or energy that gives Lee visions of Longlegs. I think that's what's going on here. Doesn't matter. Because the next scene has Nick Cage, Longlegs, visiting a hardware store and being creepy with a young girl. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. She insults him, and then we get this. Fucking awesome. Lee and Carter then visit the mental hospital to question Carrie Ann. The two agents find out that someone has already visited her using Lee Harker as a sign-in name. Weird. And Carrie Ann is nuts. But she thinks she recognizes Lee. She recounts the incident at the Camera family farm and talks about the person who visited her using Lee's name. It was Longlegs, obviously. And she mentions how she would do anything for him or the man downstairs. A not-so-subtle nod to the devil. It turns out that she was in a catatonic state until Carter and Lee found the doll in the hayloft. Carter also suspects Lee is withholding information on her connection with Longlegs. It turns out that her mother, Ruth, had filed a police report after a stranger had approached Lee on her 9th birthday. Carter instructs Lee to visit her mother and see what she knows about that police report. But Ruth won't talk about it. She has, however, kept all of her daughter's childhood belongings.
I might have forgotten everything I possibly could, for both of our sakes, but I never threw anything away.
Upon finding a collection of Polaroids, Lee has a flashback about Longlegs singing a song.
Let me in now, and it can be nice.
More or less. All you really need to know is that the little girl from the beginning of the movie was Lee. Oh. Now that the FBI knows who they're after, Longlegs is immediately apprehended. Easy peasy. The end. Ugh, if only. No, of course it's not over. We need to see Nick Cage vamp and chew scenery for a few long minutes first. Lee gets to interrogate him, and he spouts off some cryptic crap about the devil and Lee's mother and blah 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 blah. I heard there's like some 20-odd minutes of Nick Cage acting like a lunatic in the first interrogation scene, the one the agents watch on TV. And honestly, without even seeing it, I know it's more entertaining than this entire movie. They should have just released that. So Longlegs smashes his own head to a bloody pulp in front of Lee, which pisses off Agent Carter for some reason. He gets all up in her face about it.
We let all those families die, and nothing about any of that is better or okay, but it's done.
And reveals that Carrie Ann jumped off the roof of the mental hospital earlier that day. Agent Browning, concerned about Lee's mental state, drives her to her mother's home. They need to question her about what she knows, but Lee thinks it's better if she goes in alone. After entering the house, Lee witnesses her mother shooting Agent Browning in the car. Shocked by her mother's actions, she confronts Ruth outside, where she is pointing her shotgun at a doll that looks like a young Lee. Ruth shoots the doll after finding out that Longlegs is dead, releasing a dark cloud from both Lee and the doll, and Lee immediately passes out. In a dream flashback, Lee sees that her mother has been Longlegs' accomplice for years. In an effort to save her daughter, Ruth agreed to help Longlegs with his demonic plan. He lived in their basement, making dolls that Ruth would deliver to families while posing as a nun. The dolls would then in turn influence the fathers of each family to go on a rampage before ending themselves. When Lee finally wakes up, she gets a telephone call from Satan himself, I suppose, who reminds her about Ruby Carter's birthday party. Lee hops in Longlegs' station wagon, which had been left at her mother's house before his capture, and heads out to try and save her boss and his family. When she arrives at the Carter house, Lee finds out that they have already been possessed by Ruby's doll. Agent Carter kills his wife, which Lee doesn't bother trying to prevent. She does, however, shoot her boss when he tries to kill Ruby, and Lee is also forced to shoot her mother. She tries to shoot the doll, but her gun won't fire. And let's just insert a pointless Longlegs clip.
Hail Satan.
The end. Alright, so before I dump all over this movie, let's talk about a few things that were actually pretty good. Like the cinematography. It's great. It's better than this movie deserved, and it's the number one reason why I think people liked this movie. From an aesthetic standpoint, it's fantastic. It's simple yet artistic and expressive. Andre Orochi Tinayero, I hope I'm saying that correctly, in his first work in this role on a full-length movie, smashes it out of the park. And likewise, Elvis Perkins, using the pseudonym Zilgi, whatever, creates an equally impressive soundscape. The soundtrack of T-Rex songs and original scores do a great job of creating a very particular atmosphere. It's raw and oppressive, and the overall sound design of the movie is beautiful, if a bit heavy-handed. And then there's Nick Cage. I find him hit and miss. I either love him in his roles or I absolutely hate him. I loved him in The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent from 2022, and I absolutely hated him in Ghost Rider. And while I can absolutely understand why some folks couldn't get past his Nick Cage-isms for this one, I actually think it's a role he was meant to play. I wish I had seen this before knowing he was in it, and I wish he had done the role uncredited to really mess with audiences. But yeah, I liked him in this one. A good director does a number of things, and Osgood Perkins does a number of those things quite well.
Let's start there.
And other things not so much.
Oh no shit.
As far as working with his cinematographer and hiring his brother for the score, Osgood gets a double thumbs up. But in terms of pulling the best performances from his actors, in terms of writing and directing a compelling story, in terms of creating something original, I didn't see anything original in this movie. There are hints of Tarantinoism, trying to cobble together inspiration from multiple sources, but Perkins is no Tarantino, and the result is a film that feels incredibly banal. It's like a drawn-out episode of The X-Files without the engaging leads. Maika Monroe's Harker is uninteresting and one-dimensional. She's no Dana Scully or Clarice Starling, and while the atmosphere created through the excellent cinematography and score is effective, it's just a reminder of how much better it was when David Lynch did it in Twin Peaks. And Longlegs also suffers from the Donnie Darko problem. That's when a movie appears to be intelligent and deep, but as soon as its creators talk about it, you realize it was all fluke. It wasn't designed with forethought, but rather became something greater purely by accident. Osgood Perkins revealed in a Deadline interview that he only set the movie in the 90s because of personal nostalgia, because it quote-unquote looked good. What's even worse is that when he spoke with IndieWire, Osgood revealed that if he had set the movie in 1992, as was originally the case, he would have had to have George Bush's photo up in the FBI office. So he pushed the setting forward a couple years so that he could have Bill Clinton instead, which is f***ing bonkers, and it goes to show that the 90s time period of the movie meant literally nothing to the story. As for its characters, and I want to preface this by clarifying that I'm not a Maika Monroe hater. I haven't seen her in a ton of stuff, but she's in one of my favorite horror flicks, It Follows, and I thought she did a great job in that. So yeah, as for its characters, this movie has some real issues that I can't get past. Maka's Lee Harker is so inconsistent emotionally. For the first half of the movie, I thought she might be autistic or something. Just no reaction to anything that's going on. And then oddly emotional in the second half. The progression didn't feel logical or well developed. It would have made sense if she were void of emotion prior to her doll being destroyed, and then emotional afterwards, symbolic of Satan's grasp being relinquished or some crap like that. But no. Oh, and she's half psychic? Really? What was the point of that? She only uses her powers at the very beginning of the movie, and then it's more or less forgotten about. I mean, you could argue that she uses her powers when she touches the Polaroid of Longlegs, but come on, it's bullshit. It was an absolutely pointless inclusion that only served as a way to facilitate flashbacks. And you f***ed up with plot development when you have to spell everything out through an expositional upchuck at the end of the movie.
That was the deal that she made.
Lee's mother destroys her doll in Act 3, and I guess her memories come flooding back, and we get the entire story of Longlegs and Ruth, and pretty much everything you would expect an FBI agent to figure out through, I don't know, a f***ing investigation?
Well, it does sound like a good idea, but no.
It makes pretty much everything that's happened up to this point seem, well, rather pointless. All style, no substance. Speaking of all style, no substance, let's chat about the elephant in the room, Nick Cage. As I mentioned previously, I liked him in this role. But let's be honest here, his Longlegs character isn't creepy or frightening because of how well written he is. He's creepy and frightening because Nick Cage is creepy and frightening. Longlegs is just a standard Nick Cage lunatic performance, but this time he's wearing a prosthetic face mask caked in white makeup. I mean, it works, I guess, it's fine. Outside of Cage's performance, the character is standard horror movie fare, motivated by the devil, whatever. But can we talk about smashing your face into the table? What a tired trope. It's supposed to shock the audience, but that only works the first couple of times. Before seeing it in Longlegs, I had already seen it this year in Russell Crowe's bland exorcism movie, The Exorcism, and before that in Talk to Me, and before that in Hereditary, albeit in a more creative way. But it's everywhere. It's the de facto cheap thrill in possession movies, and it's just plain lazy.
Yeah, that could be anything but a coincidence.
There's a fine line between lazy and artistic. I really can't stress this enough. Just because a movie is slow and methodical doesn't mean it's good. In terms of creating an atmosphere, it works here, but that comes at the expense of the story, and it makes the movie feel monotonous and heavy. I wasn't on the edge of my seat with this one. I heard from a bunch of people who thought this was the scariest thing they've seen all year, which is more of a condemnation of 2024 horror movies than it is an accomplishment of Longlegs. I was just bored for most of the movie. I think it primarily has to do with not being involved in the story. Everything Lee figures out is internalized. With movies like Silence of the Lambs, you're trying to follow the investigation. You're involved. But that's not the case with Longlegs. Which is probably why the ending is terrible. I had no connection to Lee, or to her boss and his family, or to anyone in this movie. So why would I care if any of them live or die? And the filmmakers were clearly trying to do something provocative and mysterious with the conclusion, but it just came across as confusing. And there are plenty of movies out there that leave things open-ended or primed for personal interpretation. I actually love endings like that. But when Lee is trying to save her boss's daughter and her pistol won't fire and we're supposed to wonder what happens to these two, I was just like, I don't care. I'm just glad this movie is over. But here's the thing. As much as I hated this movie, as much as I think it's an amateurish film made by pompous art house insufferables, there is a small part of me that actually liked it in a weird way. It might just be that the goods are so good that they outweigh the sea of bads. It might be nostalgia for the better movies that were ripped off to make this. It might be Nick Cage's gonzo antagonist, or any number of things, really. I don't know.
Maybe we're missing something.
I will say this, though. I don't know how that cat was still alive. How was that cat still alive?
It's okay, it's done now.
This movie reminds me of art school. After I finished high school, I attended a well-known art school here in Canada for about a year. That's all I could take. It was exactly how you think a post-secondary art school would be. Pompous and self-important and, more often than not, lacking in actual talent. And I would often find myself in class doing an open critique of student assignments. We would all present our art projects and have other students give their 2 cents on why it was good or not. Everything was more or less good because no one wanted to say anything negative. And we'd always get a preponderance of art pieces that were nothing special to look at, but came with a long-winded treatise or rationale that tried to make them seem more important or deeper than they actually were. Some people were so good at bullshitting that it actually made you wonder if their mediocre art was, in fact, amazing. That's what I think of Longlegs. It feels like mediocre art that's been elevated by bullshit that doesn't really matter. The story just isn't that good. Most of the elements that make a good movie are completely absent. But goddamn did they present one hell of a rationale. I don't know. I might be wrong, but Longlegs is probably, most likely, a truly terrible movie.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
It goes on like that for a while.